Starlight is an incomplete novel written by the late Richard Wagamese. Wagamese had passed away before he had been able to finish his novel. As a result, the novel was published incomplete during August 2018. Fortunately, for any readers who were curious, the publishers had left a brief summary on Wagamese's vision of his ending. The novel is special to any fan of Wagamese and his career, as it is the last novel he wrote and published. The novel is also a sequel to another of Wagamese's novels, Medicine Walk. However, it is not necessary to know the events of the previous story to understand the plot of Starlight. Today, I will be discussing with you about Starlight by Richard Wagamese in this book talk.
The primary setting of the book is at the protagonist, Frank Starlight's farm in northern British Columbia. Starlight's farm is outside of a community named Endako, British Columbia. There are also some minor settings our characters traverse in through the story. First off, there is Jeff Cadot's secluded cabin near Williams Lake, British Columbia. The main characters also travel to Vancouver to see the opening of Frank Starlight's art gallery. We also see the story through the antagonists, Cadot and Anderson's point of view. The two antagonists travel to Calgary and Alberta in search of one of the protagonists. The setting then ends with all the characters ending up at Starlight's farm during the climax of the story. Moving on to the plot. The plot of the story revolves around Frank Starlight and Emmy Strong. The story begins with Frank, who prefers to go by Starlight. Starlight is mourning the death of his father figure, who only is referred to as the Old Man in the novel. I did some extra research and I discovered that the Old Man's name in Medicine Walk is Bunky. Frank was raised on his old man's farm and stayed there as a hand ever since. Frank's only friend is Eugene Roth, who is another farmhand. Frank decides to save the farm and run it in his old man's honor after he passed away. The story then shifts to the perspective of Emmy Strong. Emmy has an 8-year-old daughter named Winnie Strong as well. Emmy has been stuck in a 3-year-old abusive relationship with Jeff Cadot. After taking so much abuse from Cadot, Emmy decides it is time for her and Winnie to leave. However, her original plan to steal Cadot's money and sneak out fails. The Strongs wake up Cadot and his friend Anderson, who they manage to overpower. Emmy steals Cadot's car and lights their cabin on fire. Emmy would then travel through northern British Columbia until they find an abandoned shed outside of Endako, British Columbia, where Starlight resides. Hungry and out of money, Emmy attempts to shoplift groceries using Emmy as a diversion. However, being caught by Starlight and the police and facing the risk of losing her daughter and getting charged, Starlight offers Emmy the position of a housekeeper at his farm, along with free hospitality. With no other options, Emmy accepts his offer. While at the farm, Emmy and Starlight both teach each other different skills and lessons that clashes with their character flaws. Starlight is introduced more of the technology in the outside world, and Emmy is taught to trust men from her trauma with Cadot and become less violent in general. Starlight also gains a father-daughter connection with Winnie and teaches her about the outdoors. Winnie had been violent at her elementary school, and with Starlight's help, her behavior improved greatly. The reader also learns that Starlight is a talented photographer, but he is not interested in pursuing a serious career into it. Starlight's talent is so abundant that they are opening a gallery in Vancouver, British Columbia in his honor. Early in the novel, Starlight is offered to go to the opening of the gallery, which he refuses at first. However, with Emmy's encouragement and him opening up to being in public, Starlight finally agrees to go to the opening. Starlight's only condition is that he bring Roth and the Strongs with him, to which they all agree to. On their trip to Vancouver, Winnie experiences her first true trip away from home. Starlight also gives a great speech about his life and art at the opening. Unbeknownst to the group, however, Cadot and Anderson survived the fire. They had spent the majority of the novel searching for Emmy and Winnie to get their revenge in blood. They started in Alberta and eventually headed back to the coast. They eventually reach Vancouver and locate the Strongs. At this point in the story, Wagamese had passed away, and the rest of the story is told through a small summary. The summary states that the men follow our main characters back to the farm. After realizing this, Starlight and Emmy lead the men to the backcountry. Emmy managed to trick the men and bound them, and she was armed with a knife ready to murder them. However, all her time with Starlight leads her to show mercy and peace to the men. The story then ends with Emmy and Starlight as a couple adventuring in the backcountry. Two of the main characters, Starlight and Emmy, both go through their own character change and evolution. Beginning with Emmy, she starts off as an awful mother who allowed Cato to abuse her and her daughter, Winnie. Winnie had to endure terrible living conditions and threats from Cato. Because of this environment, Winnie has been shown to be very violent along with her mother early in the novel. Emmy begins to show some change when she acknowledges that her daughter needs a proper childhood early in the book. This is given to Winnie when Starlight offers them residence at his farm. As a plus, Starlight becomes a father figure to Winnie. Starlight teaches both of the Strongs peace and calmness. Emmy begins showing her new calm nature as she is able to successfully approach and interact with a deer midway in the story. The climax of the story features Emmy's full character evolution. During her previous encounters with Cato, her abuser, she chose violence and destruction. However, during the climax, when having the upper hand over Cato, she chooses peace and mercy. Emmy began as a poor mother and a violent woman, and evolved into a better mother and a peaceful woman near the end of the story. Now, regarding Starlight, he begins as an introverted man who stays secluded at his farm at first. He is a talented photographer, however, but Starlight does not want to pursue a full career out of it. Starlight only interacts with his best friend Eugene Roth and formerly his late old man. The only occasion Starlight interacts with the public is when he runs errands at Indaco, the town closest to his farm. When Starlight meets Emmy, he allows Emmy and her daughter Winnie residence at his home. As a result, he is exposed to more people and begins forming bonds with them. He falls in love for the first time in his life with Emmy and becomes a father figure to Winnie. Through Emmy's encouragement, Starlight embraces his talent as a photographer and ventures to Vancouver to witness the opening of an art gallery in his honor. During that trip, Starlight opens up to the public about his art and life as well. It is most likely this was the first time in Starlight's life that he spoke in a large public gathering, and he had nailed it. At the end of the story, Starlight's social skills and outgoingness improves greatly. He also becomes a great partner to Emmy and a father figure to Winnie. Richard Wagamese displays an excellent writing style, which is unique to himself only. He wrote many phrases and sentences that really got to my heart personally. I'll be giving you some of my favorite passages from the story. First off, Wagamese uses a metaphor to describe the antagonist Cato in the story. This excerpt is taken from the 307th page in the story. Quote, "But Cato was a black hole that absorbed and killed everything, and made it disappear into a whirling vortex, whose only gravity was pain." This quote hits me differently due to how disturbing and unique its description is of Cato. Being somebody who's always been fascinated with how space is, including black holes as a little kid, it lends a whole new level of disturbance while comparing Cato to a black hole. Another piece of writing I enjoyed from Wagamese was the ending of his epilogue on page 232. Quote, "Then she stepped towards the trees and broke into a crouching run, and the man watched her disappear, silently into the shadow. He smiled again, then ran after her." I enjoy Wagamese's method of description of such a simple action, and it is something that you will encounter many times while reading the novel. It also hits hard from reading the prologue, as it began with Starlight and ended with him. However, instead of starting as a depressed man in mourning, he is now a happy man with the right woman in his life. The last passage I would like to share with everybody is from page 188. It describes Starlight's way of talking through accents and slang, which he shares with Roth as well. It also goes into his backstory as well. I'm going to try quoting this, but I might mess this up, so no pressure on me. Quote, "Feeling lost and not knowing why. I carried that around a long time, and I never told no one until I told the old man, finally. That's when he brung me out here, and he taught me how to touch the deer." I enjoy this quotation as it displays Starlight's unique way of speaking that we don't see in other characters too much in the story, making him stand out. Wagamese uses this also to give a sense of realism in the characters in the way that they talk. They don't talk all formally like they're having a dinner with the Queen of England or somebody of high status. From my outlook, Starlight features many important themes and messages from the reader. However, two that stood out for me were the message of domestic violence and healing in a person. Domestic violence is prevalent through our country and the entire world, as a matter of fact. It shows the true evil that lurks inside of people. The author Richard Wagamese displays this excellently in Starlight. We witness a bite-sized amount of the situation the victim Emmy and Winnie Strong had to endure from Cato, their abuser. As an example, I've taken an excerpt from page 24 to display what Cato had done to the two. Quote, "He beat her. He threatened to beat the girl, to take her too." Not only was domestic abuse displayed, but child abuse as well. Wagamese excellently gives us a perspective that many men and women endure secretly every day worldwide. It makes us think about the people that have to deal with this every day. It is an excellent message to promote the wrongs of domestic violence and bring further awareness to the matter. The message of domestic violence overall was the most interesting thing to learn from this book as well. It is something I personally cannot relate to, as well as many others that were listening to this possibly. I think it is great that Richard Wagamese chose to include this and bring a little bit more exposure to the matter. Next, the theme of healing in Wagamese's novel correlates greatly to the theme of domestic violence. Winnie and Emmy Strong are both victims of domestic abuse. During the beginning, they are both traumatized and at their worst state in their lives. Both are very angry and violent towards men and live an unbalanced life. It is through meeting Starlight that they begin their healing phase. The two women become less violent in their own unique ways in the story. They begin to trust men as well, both Starlight and even Eugene Roth. This theme can also be compared to Starlight as at the start of the story, he is mourning the loss of his old man, who was his father figure. He is even more isolated than before after losing his biggest father figure in his life. Through meeting the Strongs, Starlight now has more company and something to live for besides Roth and his farm. It helps him move on from the mourning phase of his old man. It similarly works as a passing on the torch moment, from his old man passing on the torch to Starlight, as like his old man, Starlight becomes a father figure and a partner towards the Strongs. This message of healing can have a tremendous impact on myself and others as well. Within a world of addiction and pain, it is good to remember that this does not have to be permanent, and healing is always possible for everyone, and something that everybody must understand and know. Starlight by Richard Wagamese is an excellent novel. It is unfortunate that Wagamese never got to complete his story, and we are only given 2 pages of his incomplete vision. What I loved about the book was that Wagamese excellently organized every part of the story. He divided his novel into 3 books. The books basically operate as acts, dividing each development and events cleanly. Chapters were also done great, as they were very easy to summarize and take notes on due to them being unique to themselves. For example, whatever event occurred in a chapter stayed in that chapter to not overcomplicate things for the reader. There is also no filler or elongated segments of the story, so it flows very well. There were not many things I disliked about the novel as well, only that the novel was incomplete. However, this was out of the author and publisher's control. One thing I did wish Wagamese had done was expand a certain character in the story. This character in question was Anderson. Anderson is a very underdeveloped and unexplored character in the story. He is only seen as a minor antagonist and as Cadot's lackey and nothing more. It would have been interesting, as Wagamese would have given an interesting character arc, I believe, as in one chapter we do see that Anderson begins questioning Cadot's methods and brutality, but it isn't really expanded that much. Overall, I highly recommend everybody to check out this novel. It lays out a deep message of domestic violence and personal healing. If I were to rate this out of 100%, I would give Starlight by Richard Wagamese an 85%. Overall, the story is greatly organized and told by the author. It develops the main characters perfectly and has displayed great portrayals of the world. There are minor issues such as a lack of a true ending and some neglect for some minor characters. Even so, Starlight is a great story and I recommend everybody watching to go check it out right now.